Welcome again to Cottage Talk. I am Russ Goldman. Joining me right now is Tony Gold. This is another episode of the silly season update. What this is going to entail is it's going to be a review of the Fulham fixtures. They were released yesterday. Tony and I will give our thoughts on it in several different ways. We also will be talking about some transfer speculation at the end of the show. We also have something interesting that we're going to talk about at the beginning of the show. A lot to get to in this episode. I do want to mention that we are broadcasting live on 3 platforms, but if you want to listen to the podcast as a podcast, it is going to be exclusive on the Cottage Talk Patreon page. If you see the scroll, you're interested in becoming a paid member, please do check out the Cottage Talk Patreon page. I also want to mention one of the platforms that we are live on is YouTube. And I'm really trying to get people to subscribe to the YouTube channel. Please do subscribe. We have about 803 subscribers. Please do subscribe. Doesn't cost you anything to subscribe. It'll just alert you when we go live. All right. Let's get to it, Tony. Before we talk about the topics we're going to talk about, how you doing?
I'm good, thank you. Great to be back. Looking forward to it.
I am very much looking forward to it. Of course, we have our friend Chris, who's ready to go. Doesn't miss a show, Tony. He's there with us.
Yeah, he's a good man. Good man.
He's a very good man. He's a great man. So we will be looking at your comments, and I definitely want your comments for this show. If you're watching live, please feel free to share your comments because I've got a subject that I really want the Fulham supporters to get their thoughts on. Let's start off here, Tony. Happy birthday to Brian McBride. Let's talk about Brian McBride. Everyone knows that has listened to Cottage Talk that Clint Dempsey was my vehicle to Fulham, but I also knew about Fulham because of some other American players. One was Brian McBride. And I've watched Brian McBride before he was at Fulham, obviously for the U.S. men's national team, and then at Fulham as well. And he had a huge impact. So if you're watching live and want to leave a comment on your thoughts on Brian McBride, please do. Tony, I want to go to you. Let's talk about the impact of Brian McBride at Fulham. He's a Fulham legend. Is it fair to call him a Fulham legend?
Yeah, 100%. I think he's up there. He's one of those players, Russ, that, he was just honest. He was honest as the day was long. It's hard to believe that we signed him 21 years ago. I think it was 2004 when we signed him. He made over 140 appearances, scored 40 goals, and then was handed the armband in, I think, 2007. And he was just a very honest, hardworking, great player for us, and one that actually probably isn't spoken about enough. Actually, could never give more for the club than what he did, and he was actually, I felt at the time, very underrated. Actually, and yeah, listen, they don't make centre forwards like him very much anymore. They're very hard to find. So time flies, and and now we're looking back on. What is he, 45 today, Russ? Is he 40? What is he, 46?
I believe so. I actually didn't catch the age, so I should be honest with you. I didn't catch the age.
So, yeah, and he had some great moments for us as well in that time.
He did, Tony. The one thing that stands out for me, I really remember, obviously, the end of his career. And if I remember correctly, he got injured in that Great Escape season, came back, and I thought he was pivotal, even though, obviously, we could talk about the goals at the end of the season for other players. I think him coming back at the end of that Great Escape season was vital for Fulham staying in the league.
Yeah, absolutely. There were so many, good memories. I think the one for me was...
There could be one that stands out.
Well, the one for me was when Fulham beat Arsenal for the first time in 40 years. And I think it was in 2006. And he scored a header, which sent us on our way. I think that was the game that Van Persie scored that unbelievable free kick. Yeah, I mean, it was unbelievable. And then Senderos, I think, got sent off. And yeah, we went on to win the game. It was just that moment, that was him. He was good in the air. He was really good in the air, really good with his head. But there were, as I say, there were many great moments that Fulham fans will remember for him for. And obviously, I think his last goal that he scored for us before he left, which was against Birmingham, I think in 2008.
Yeah, I remember that. And like I said, for me, obviously Clint brought me to the club. I've said that many times, but listen, there used to be McBrides. That should tell you all you need to know, Tony.
Yeah, absolutely. And like Chris says there, that we could do with that sort of player, now actually, probably most Premier League clubs could, to be fair. But yeah, look, he's one player that will go down and has gone down in Fulham history, and will always be spoken about and talked about in a good light. He was one of, as I said, one of those honest, hardworking players that everyone had a lot of respect for.
Okay, great to start the show talking about Brian McBride. And one last time, happy birthday, Brian. Maybe you can come on Cottage Talk sometime. I'd love to speak to you about your time at Fulham and what it meant to you. So, but I want to wish you a very happy birthday. All right, Tony, let's get to talking about the fixtures, all right? So before we get into really talking about it, we're going to break down it in a couple different ways. We're going to talk about the first couple months. I want to mention January. Definitely want to talk about the toughest part of the fixture list, get into that. But just give me your overall thoughts of when you saw it, because I always have a reaction. I always look at the beginning, and when I looked at this beginning, the first things that came out of my mouth were, uh-oh. So what was your first gut reaction?
Yeah, I think when it came out, I think the first thing that hit me was, wow, that is a strong start, really tough start. I mean, the games are going to be coming thick and fast, and, on paper, there isn't an easy game, but then I think every sort of side in the Premier League looked at their fixtures when they came out and went, oh, that's tough, that's tough, that's tough. And I think that's what, sums up the Premier League next season, Russ. It's going to be a competitive, tough league. And there are no easy games, and I think it's going to be one of those leagues this year where you'll find that everybody will beat everybody. And, there's going to be a few shocks, a few upsets, but it's also one of those seasons where you have to hit the ground, running. You don't want to be playing catch up in this league. And especially with the fixtures that we've got, we do not want to be playing catch up.
Absolutely, Tony. We certainly don't. So let's get to really breaking this down a little bit. So let's start with the first 2 months of the season, because I think that's a good starting point. Because like I said, I started with but I think most clubs look at that and they start to think, what is this all about? So let's go through the matches in August and September. So we open away at Brighton, which honestly, Tony, is not going to be easy. But it's the first match of the season, so maybe that is an opportunity. Fulham definitely need to beat Manchester United at home. I can't deal with Manchester losing again to them in the league. But that's not going to be easy because we don't know what type of team they're going to build. Then you're away at Stamford Bridge. That's your August. Follow that up with, in September, you're home against Leeds United, home against Brentford. Now, two teams, we don't know what they're going to be like. So that's what's interesting there. Are Brentford going to be the same with a new manager? I don't know. Leeds United are coming up. They're going to be full of confidence. And then we're away at Aston Villa, which is also difficult. That's the first 2 months of the season. So, my friend, what do you make of this? Just give me your opening thoughts on the first 2 months of the season.
Yeah, look, I think our home form is going to be critical. It has to be better than it was last season. That's absolutely sure. But, Man U, Leeds and Brentford at home, they're not easy, but they're games that I would expect us to be very competitive in. And if we're at our best, and obviously we don't know what our starting 11 is going to look like with the summer signings coming in. We don't know what all these other teams are going to look like. Brentford will have a new manager. They'll have a new system. They'll have a new, shape and a way of playing. So they're going to be an unknown entity really, and they're going to lose a couple of players as well. I think, Russ, I think that it's one of those where, as I say, we have to hit the ground running, and we have to be at it from day dot. Historically, we've done all right at Brighton over the years.
Yeah.
And I always think the first first 2 or 3 games are always, you always get some unexpected stuff happening. I think that normally high scoring games, normally, but both teams are at it, and so they never sort of end up falling the way that you want them to go. But I think by the time we get to the Bournemouth game in October, things would have settled down, and obviously we haven't got an easy October either.
No, we do not.
Newcastle, Bournemouth, Arsenal. I mean, there are no easy months, no easy games. We have to make sure that we're in and around it, and we're picking up points at home, especially at home. We've got to get those games in the bag 100%.
See, I'm glad that you brought this up, Tony, because when I look over the fixtures, I'm doing it right now as we're talking about. I know I was focusing on August and September because I think that's where you start, and that also gets me to think. And we did this on rinse and repeat. This is why I think it's very important to have your squad almost at full strength by the time you start the season, because there's also an opportunity here to get points early against teams that are starting to try to figure things out themselves. Difficult opponents on paper. So it's a wonderful opportunity early on, but it could also set you back. That's why I look at these 2 months as actually fairly important. But when I look over the fixtures in general, Tony, and I'm definitely going to focus on January coming up. In general, like you said, I don't see really any easy months. Do you see a point in the season where you're saying to yourself, well, they can pick up a lot of points here?
Well, I think the 2 crucial months for me will be December and January, Russ.
December and January.
Yeah, because they're cramming, 12 games. That's 12 games in those 2 months. And don't get me started on why we're not playing on Boxing Day. That has really wound me up.
Someone has to explain that one to me.
It's a joke. But, also remember, a lot of these fixtures will change in terms of, because of live TV, we're going to have some Friday night games, some Monday night games, some Sunday afternoon, the usual nonsense that goes on. So some of these will change. But for me, the critical period will be the 6 games December, the 6 games January. And in that period, we have to pick up double figures. We have to. There's no ifs, buts, and maybes. And the home games, we've got City at home, Palace at home, Forest at home, Liverpool at home, Chelsea at home. Tough home games, really tough over that period. So for me, that's going to be the critical period in Fulham's season.
Okay, and I'm glad that you mentioned that, because now I really want to focus a little bit on January. And I'm glad you said December and January, because there are all those matches. But I want to really go a little bit deeper into January, because when you look at it, right, these are tough home matches. January 3rd, home against Liverpool. January 7th, only 4 days later, Tony, against Chelsea, back to back. And then you're away at Ellen Road against Leeds United. Then you're back home against Brighton.
Yeah,
and then you've got an FA Cup, Manchester United.
And then you've got an FA Cup game in the middle of that as well.
That's right. So that's why I totally understand why you are focusing on December, January, because I see where you're going on. Those are vital parts of the season, Tony.
Yeah, and you know what it's like, Russ. If you come off the back of a home defeat against Liverpool and a home defeat against Chelsea, which is not inconceivable because this is Fulham you're talking about.
Yeah.
And that depends where we are when we get into that period. It shows how crucial it is that Fulham get off to a really good start and keep that momentum. And as we always say, consistency is always the key in the Premiership. We can't have what we had last season, I don't think, with this win one, lose one, win one, lose one, because I think the Premier League is a lot stronger. It will be a lot stronger, and there'll be much less wiggle room for mistakes and errors and teams to go on runs of long periods without winning football matches. So it's not going to be easy, Russ. It really isn't. And it goes back to the importance of our recruitment and making sure that that's absolutely spot on. Has to be.
I couldn't agree with you more. That's why I'm focusing on what we're talking about because I think it does come down to recruitment. It does come down to not just recruitment. I want to also mention anyone that has seen the picture of Emile Smith-Rowe, obviously getting ready for the new season. I think that's important, Tony. We've talked about that. But also, it's not just him. It's getting all together and getting together as a team. And I think it's going to be important, not just the players that they bring in, but also who they keep and who they decide to build around. Because they need to have a squad like we're talking about, ready to go from the beginning. That's why it bothers me that Fulham waits so late to the end of the window to try to get some players, whether it's 2 to 3 players. I would rather have their business done, Tony, before we start the season. I know in an ideal world, that's what I'm looking at. But why am I so crazy to want that? Why shouldn't they want that? It shouldn't always be about, well, we're going to wait for the right situation to get the player. I've heard Joachim Anderson is the example of them doing that they waited and waited and waited and got a loan deal. But honestly, I think that they should be putting their money where their mouth is and get the players in and build the squad to fight for Europe. That's the way I look at it. But like we talked about with rinse and repeat, they look at it differently than we do.
I've always thought that the transfer window should close.
It should.
Before the first game of the Premier League season.
Absolutely.
Honestly, I genuinely believe that. I can't bear the fact that it stays open right till the end. And by that time, we would have played 3 games. And, it's a nonsense. Look, in my opinion, Russ, Silva and Fulham, Tony Khan, McIntosh, whoever's behind all the signings, whatever, they need to get those players in before the Brighton game because our squad has to be settled. It has to be ready. There has to be depth. There has to be the quality there. We have to be sorted defensively. And we can't go in to those 3 games and coming out of those 3 games at the end of August, knowing that we're a centre-half short, a forward short, a midfielder short, and because it just ends up becoming an absolute nightmare.
Totally agree, Tony. All right. Let's move on with our talk about the fixtures. So I think we've kind of really gotten to it, but when you are analyzing the fixtures, this is, again, just on paper, what we're looking at. In your opinion, toughest part of the fixture list?
I think, definitely the first 3 games. I mean, that is tough. Brighton, Man U, Chelsea, that is really tough. So for me, that's a period that is going to be interesting because, as I say, 9 points out of those games, and you'd be thinking, wow, that's unbelievable. But realistically, is that going to happen? Unlikely. And then, as you say, going towards the end of the season, if we're playing for Europe or we need to get into Europe or, we're in a situation where, we've got to win 2 of our last 4 games or 5 games, you look at that and you're thinking, Bournemouth, Wolves, Newcastle, your last 3 games.
Yeah.
Again, not easy. Not easy. No. As you say, we've spoken about it. I say for me, January, December, also really tough. So I don't think there's any really easy parts, Russ, where you're thinking we can relax, we can take our foot off, we can just sort of coast through and then re-go again. I think we have to be at it all season.
Okay. So as we're talking about it, as we're looking at the fixtures, you brought up something that I actually agree with. Well, I want to talk a little bit about it before we talk about the away match you most look forward to and the home match you would probably most look forward to. Is this. They can't afford, I think, 2 seasons in a row to do what they did last season. I think last season it worked to a point, but I think it also hampered them getting into Europe. I think when you are winning 1, losing 1 consistently like that, I think that just shows that you're just not quite there yet. So they need to take a step upward. I think if they started doing that again against the opponents we're seeing this season, like you said, the additions in the league, and I think Everton's going to be stronger. You've already mentioned Manchester United and Tottenham. I don't know how much stronger they're going to be because I think they're still in transition. They might be a little bit better, but the league is going to be better. So let's just talk about what they need to do here, because I don't think they can afford to do this 2 seasons in a row.
No, they can't. And this is going to be the season that tests Marco Silva, Ross. This is, we're going to find out what Marco Silva learnt, this season. What did he learn? What did he take from this season? What is he going to be able to manifest to change what needs to be done next season to push us on? That is his gauntlet as the manager this season, going into this season. That's what has to say. Now, we've talked about the definition of madness a million times, right?
Yes.
I have to see a completely different structure to the way that he sets us up defensively and how he sees games out when we get in front. Remember, we lost games from winning positions, threw away points, 28 points, Russ.
Yeah.
He has to halve that next season. For him to be successful and to take us where we need to go, that's where I need to see the change. And it's how we are defensively as a collective with our back 4 or 5, whatever it is, how they respond and how they improve as a group. That's the area that needs to be improved.
Okay. And I'm glad that you talked about, we have not really talked about this at all, but we're looking at ways that they can improve and not do what they did last season. Stuart Gray has left Fulham. What are your thoughts on that? Because we're talking about defensively. He was thought of as someone that was pivotal to what they did defensively. So what do you make of Stuart Gray leaving?
Great, a great ambassador for the club, that done a lot of good, but it was time. It needs freshening up. It needs a new voice. It needs new ideas. It's clear to see that. And, whoever Silva brings in as that replacement, again, needs to step up, needs to show their qualities as a coach. For me, it's about structure. It's about organization. It's about discipline. And I think in a lot of matches last season, we were lacking in those areas. And whoever, as I say, comes in is going to earn their money and really got to work on that, has got to get into that group of players, whoever it is, and get them much more organized, much stronger, much fitter, and much more lively off the ball when we haven't got possession, because that is where we struggled in vast games last season, at vast moments in times. That's where we struggled. People didn't necessarily notice it or see it, but I'm telling you, that is where we really, really came unstuck in the end.
Okay. Excellent there, Tony. Very good. All right. Right back to you, okay? Let's talk about away match you most look forward to.
Well, apart from the obvious, which is obviously the Chelseas and the Brentfords, the 2 games that I'm looking forward to, I always look forward to Spurs away. Always love going there. And obviously, I think Chris mentioned Scott Parker, so I'm really looking forward to going to Burnley this year. Really looking forward to that. I mean, we don't tend to do particularly well there because it's such a turgid place to go. But I'm looking forward to that one for obvious reasons.
Okay, I'm going to throw one at you. I'm curious your thoughts on. How about the Stadium of Light?
Listen, it's a great place. Sunderland is, I mean, I've never been there, so it's one, depending on what day.
It's a long trek.
Oh, it's a mission. It's an absolute mission. But yeah, I mean, that will be good because their fans are fantastic. Whatever you say, Sunderland are a very well supported club, and again, that's not going to be an easy place to go. No. Trust me, teams are not going to enjoy going there. So yeah, that's one to look forward to. Leeds, another one. They're back in the Premier League.
Chris mentioned Everton's new ground.
Yeah, 100%. Everyone's going to want to go there because the Hill Dickinson, is it the Hill Dickinson Stadium? That's one that everyone's going to want to see and do now. So yeah, look, there's some really exciting ones, but my 2 mainly, Tottenham and Burnley, are the ones that I'm gonna look forward to the most.
Okay, very good. All right, let's now talk about home match you most are looking forward to. I did not put the date down before I go to you, but I'm telling you right now, the one that I'm most looking forward to, Burnley at home. I'm just going to say it right now. Burnley at home.
Yeah, well, that's again, He's going to get absolutely rinsed when he gets.
I can't wait for that. I can't wait for that.
He is going to get. It'll be interesting to see the reception. Actually, it's going to be really, really interesting. But yeah, no. Home games. I always look forward to welcoming the top six. I always look forward to those games. Man City, Arsenal, Spurs, Chelsea. You know, I always look forward.
Look at Chris. He has to do this. Look at Chris.
Yeah, well, you know, they're gonna want to put that right for sure.
Okay, so you really focus on the top six.
Yeah, I think because they're the teams you want to beat. At the end of the day, you know, you there's a certain expectation when you play, you know, I don't know, Bournemouth at home or Everton at home. No disrespect to those clubs, but you know, there's a certain expectation. But you know, when Arsenal come to town and Chelsea and Liverpool and Man U and City, you want to beat those teams. They're the teams you want to beat.
Right. No, I hear you, man. Okay. All right. Now, coming up with the second half of the show, we're going to talk about some transfer speculation. It's the silly season. What's interesting here, Tony, is I'm going to share some transfer speculation involving some of the Fulham youngsters. We're also going to talk about Rodrigo Muniz and Ricardo Pepi as well. Now, I just thought about this before we went live, so I don't have a slide for it, but I want to talk a little bit more because I want to focus our transfer speculation first on Fulham's academy. We talked about this before. It looks like Callum Osmond is off to Celtic. And I got to tell you, every time I see a tweet about it, it just disappoints me that it's gotten to this point. And some of the other transfer speculation we talk about, I think it's going to upset you as well. Let's start with just talking about Osmond, and then we'll move on to the other speculation of the Fulham Academy, and then we'll talk about the other players I mentioned.
Yeah, so I think with the Osmond one, it's a two-barreled one, isn't it? Ultimately, I would imagine Fulham want to keep him, but as a young player that wants to break in, he's probably looking at. And obviously, we don't know the full facts, and we're not privy to it. But yeah. I'd imagine that he's looking at it, thinking, "Where's my pathway into the first team? Am I going to get an opportunity? Is Silva going to play me?" So when you've got a club like Celtic sniffing around, which, you know, at the end of the day, they're a big club, and they're having conversation, they're saying, listen, we'll give you a pathway, we'll give you an opportunity. Look what we did with O'Reilly when he came over. Yep. You will get an opportunity and we will give it to you. You know, he's going to be thinking about that and looking at his career development. And ultimately, I know what I would do if I was his age and I was a young player and I want to play. I'm going to the team that wants me, you know, wants to play me. And I can't wait around another 2 years for an opportunity. Yep. So however frustrating and annoying it is, this seems to be, you know, the norm at Fulham at the moment with young players. If we don't start giving them opportunities, if we don't start giving them a pathway, if we don't start getting them into the first team, they will leave because they want to play.
Right. And I agree with that. But in this situation, I think it's a little bit different than the other situations we're going to talk about because I don't think that they handled it well, especially when they had the opportunity at the end to play Osmond. But I don't blame the kid for getting an opportunity to play at Celtic. So if I'm looking at it from his perspective, totally understand it, Tony. From a Fulham perspective, I just think it's a missed opportunity to keep him with us. But they probably tried, but to the kid's credit, he wants to play. And I think that's going to be a theme here. So let's move on. This one, I'm not sure if you saw this today. This actually came up just a little while ago. Reportedly, Man City and Liverpool are monitoring the situation with 16-year-old midfielder Seth Ridgen. Now, Seth Ridgen, only 16 years old, plays in central midfield, is part of the setup with England right now at the youth level, Tony. And apparently, reportedly, he's out of contract this summer. I'm not sure about the situation at 16, if you can be under contract. I'm not exactly sure, to be honest with you. I should say that. But what do you make of this situation?
So I have never seen him play, Russ. I don't know too much about him. I did read the reports that you know, those two clubs were looking at him. Again, I mean, look, he is very young. I don't know how long he's been.
I haven't seen him play, so I don't know.
In the academy. So, look, again, if a club like if clubs like Liverpool and Manchester City are sniffing around you, you've got to have something about you, right? So they've obviously seen something. But again, it's going to involve his parents. It's going to involve him. It's going to involve the club. It's going to involve conversations. It's going to involve pathways. It's going to involve what does it actually mean? And as we know, the grass isn't always greener, as you've seen, countless times. So my advice to Seth Ridgen would be, think long and hard before you make any hard fire, quick decisions about, upping and moving. And you're still learning your trade. You're still very young. So if you're happy at Fulham and it's all going well, then stay, continue to develop, continue to learn. And, let's see what happens in 2 years' time when you're 18.
Right. And it's funny because when I saw this, I thought of Matt O'Reilly right away, because Matt O'Reilly has the same type of interest from big clubs. And look at Matt O'Reilly now, Tony. Just it's really an amazing story on his part. And of course, we could look at what Fulham didn't do in regards to Matt O'Reilly, but kudos and credit to him. But yes, it's a situation. Maybe you wait a few years, the grass isn't always greener. And his situation, like I said, I just read is up in the summer. So hopefully something can be done with Fulham and he stays and develops in the academy that he's been at. So we shall see what happens, because when you get in those setups, you can get lost in the shuffle pretty easy, Tony. Wouldn't you agree with that? That's the issue that I have, is that you better be at the top of the top, or you could get eaten up a little bit, as we would say over here, by just the amount of players that are probably going to be on his level if you go to a Man City or Liverpool.
Yeah, absolutely. But also, which, what we should say is that, again, if the academy managers and coaches feel that a player is ready and they're presenting them to Marco Silva and his staff, and Marco Silva looks at them like we've seen with Josh King and Godo and so on and so forth, if they genuinely feel that they've got a place and they believe that they've got an opportunity to push on and become professional footballers, they've got to keep them in and around the first team as much as possible. And Silva has to find that trust to play them and give them the opportunity to learn and develop. And I know what you're saying. We've got to look after them and we've got to make sure that they're ready. I get that. But you can still play them in games. You can still give them the opportunity. And we saw a number of games last season which either Fulham had won comfortably or lost comfortably, and you could have thrown them in and give them 25, 30 minutes. It never happened. It never happened. Right. And it's funny. Here's what Chris said. And Chris is a Liverpool supporter, so I should stay at Fulham. I think he understands that, because I think it's a good... The truth is, Russ, he's not going to leave Fulham and then go and play for Liverpool, is he? Let's be honest. Right. Exactly. It would still take him a few years. And in those few years, if he does not prove himself within those 2 years, doesn't improve, then he could get lost in the shuffle. That's my whole thing on the Seth Ridgen thing. And we'll see what happens. And like I said, best of luck to him and his parents, because they'll be the ones making that decision. And hopefully, like I said, he stays at Fulham. All right. Tony, I mentioned this before we went live. I have one that I think might irritate you a little bit, because you and I have talked a lot about this player. We're going to talk about him now. This just hit probably about an hour before we did the show. This is from The Athletic, and it's entitled Vancouver Whitecaps Eye the Figueroa's Deal. So I'm actually going to read from the article, because I find it interesting what I was just reading and the situation I think Fulham are under with the Vancouver Whitecaps. Because believe it or not, just so anyone knows, Vancouver is actually a pretty good side in MLS. So I'm just going to read a part of it, okay? And it's actually right here in the article from The Athletic. The Figueroa's is out of contract with Fulham at the end of the month. The Athletic has learned the Vancouver Whitecaps have made an initial offer to sign De Figueroa's to a multi-year contract. A source with knowledge of the offer said the MLS side met with De Figueroa's in Vancouver ahead of Canada's Gold Cup opener. It's believed De Figueroa's is exploring multiple offers for his future, all of which have one common thread: no more youth soccer.
quote, I need first team football, unquote, he said defiantly. There you go, Tony. What do you make of this?
If this happens, I mean, there are so many strings to this bow that are so wrong. First of all, the negligence of the management to allow his contract to get to the point where it's expiring, right? That's the first thing. The second thing is, all right, I know he had injuries last season, but not having him involved anywhere near the first team last season, right? That's the second thing. The third thing is, and I'm telling you this, Russ, right? I've been around football a very, very long time. All right, never played the game professionally at the top level, but I've coached and managed at a decent level. Okay, Luke de Figuero's is a better footballer than Joachim Andersen.
Okay,
I'm telling you that.
Okay,
not as experienced, but as a footballer, he is a better footballer. He reads the game better. He's got more pace. He's quicker. He's more intelligent. He's technically stronger, and he's got youth on his side. If we let de Figuero's go without getting him signed up and involved in the first team, it will be one of the worst decisions ever in the club's history. That's how strongly I feel about it.
Wow. Okay. So, Tony, what's interesting about it, I've been reading a little bit more about the situation. Reportedly, let's just say Fulham make a deal with him. I think that he might look at a situation where he would go out on loan with Fulham for a year to get more game time, right? I'm going to say this right now. I'm not totally against that, but I think he's good enough to fight for a position to start with Fulham next season. So
he's got to be in our squad. He's got to be offered a contract. Fulham have to be serious about it, and they have to give him assurances. And Marco Silva needs to stop messing around. You know, we need a centre half, right? We need a centre half, a ball playing, intelligent, technically strong,
and he's that, man.
Centre half. He ticks all of those boxes, Russ.
Yes.
Get him signed, get him in the squad, and get him playing.
Right. And to be honest with you, and keep in mind that he's grown up his entire life in England. His father, I believe, is Canadian. So that's the connection. So I can definitely understand why he might consider playing for the Vancouver Whitecaps. So that makes sense. And like I said, they're a good side. He would fit in very well there. But then I was reading that it also might hurt him trying to get back to England someday because he would be in MLS. So that's an interesting sidebar to the whole situation. But from a Fulham perspective, what the hell are you doing here? What are you doing? Tell the kid he's going to get first team football with the first team. He can fight for his position at Fulham first team this season. That's what I would do. He has an opportunity to do that, Tony. But like I said, the quote that I read that stands out, no more youth team football for this kid. He doesn't want it. And I don't blame him. He's too good for it at this point. He's playing with the Canadian national team and thriving. What are we doing here, Tony?
I genuinely don't understand it. I really don't.
And you and I have been talking about it for a year now.
We have, and we have, and like I said, it will be pure negligence if this kid walks out of our club on a free transfer and signs for somebody else. And I'm sorry, he doesn't need to go out on loan. He just needs to get into the first team squad and fight for a place and show his qualities. And I'm telling you, when this kid is fit, when he is sharp, when he's ready to play, he is good enough.
He is, Tony.
He is good enough. And you know what? Yes, he'll make mistakes. And you know what? That's fine. Because trust me, Joachim Andersen makes a mistake every bloody game.
Okay. And keep this in mind, anyone that has not seen him play lately, he's now 6 feet tall. So he's 6 feet tall. He definitely has a more muscular build to him. When I watched him just recently play for Canada, they're comparing him to a young Tim Ream. That's all you need to know. A ball-playing center back that is extremely intelligent. That's Luke DeFigueros at a very early age. This would be a very bad situation if they let this kid go. Like I said, I know.
It winds me up, Russ, because that too much emphasis is put on physicality and strength, and you're playing in the Premier League and you've got to be strong and da da da. No, you don't, because he's so intelligent. It's the way
smart,
he uses his. It's the way that he uses the ball. It's his positioning. It's how he will play. And you know what? He's confident. He's hungry. He's young. Honestly, play him. Just give him a chance.
Totally agree, Tony. I'm there with you 100%. This is something, unfortunately, we're going to have to watch. And I just hope that he does not leave Fulham and we, talking about the club, regret it someday. So we'll have to follow this one. But like I said, I just saw this today. I was like, oh, no, this is not good. But obviously, he's playing in Canada right now, and they have the perfect opportunity, a team like Vancouver Whitecaps, to talk to him, to try to get him to play with the Vancouver Whitecaps. They're right there. So, Fulham, get your ass in gear and sign this kid and offer him something that will just tell him, we want you part of the first team. No more youth football. He doesn't want it anymore, and he's too good for it at this point. All right, my friend. I've got some more speculation. This is more of an update. I actually did this in the silly season update, but we do have some more information in regards to these two players. I want to start with Rodrigo Muniz. So this came out today that Fulham reportedly reject a bid from Leeds United for Rodrigo Muniz. And Tony, the comments that I see from the Leeds United supporters, they're excited because they are seeing Fulham linked to another striker, and they think, wow, they got a chance at Muniz because of the situation with maybe Fulham bringing in another striker. They're not related. Fulham are bringing in a third striker. I think that has been pretty self-explanatory to us that follow the club. They're not looking to replace Rodrigo Muniz. They're looking to add and have more competition at the striker position. So I don't think Fulham are going to let Rodrigo Muniz go. I think it would have to take like an insanely crazy offer for them to even consider it. I've heard 50 million is what they're looking for. I don't even think they would do it at that point. They've developed Rodrigo Muniz. Why would they let him go, Tony? What are your thoughts about this?
Again, it would be insanity if Fulham sold him. Absolute insanity. To watch him grow and develop like we have, and to see him come on leaps and bounds, and the season that he had last year, why on earth would you then suddenly decide to sell him to a club that's just been promoted back to the Premier League, right? And then go out and bring in what? What are we going to replace him with, Russ, at the moment? Who are we going to replace him with? Every team in the country is looking for a centre forward. Right? We've got one that we spent a lot of time and effort working with and developing. And actually, you know what? Next season, he could absolutely soar. Yeah, given the opportunity.
Absolutely.
Why on earth? And what is going on with all these contracts? Why are the club taking an age to get these contracts sorted out with players? I don't understand it.
Kenny Tete, the same thing.
There's loads of them. What is going on?
I don't know, my friend. And like I said, this one is frustrating. And you and I have talked about this. He is making next to nothing. I shouldn't say that. Obviously, we'd be happy to make what he's making. But in regards to Premier League players, he's making really nothing. Pay the kid some money. Now, maybe his agent's looking for a lot more. Maybe that's the holdup. I can understand that in using Leeds United as leverage. That's what I think was going on. I think his agent's trying to use Leeds United as leverage. And that makes sense to me. That absolutely does. But at some point, you kind of have to meet the agent and the player in the middle and find a number that works and get him signed. He's under contract for a year, plus there's an option year that Fulham have. So Fulham hold the cards, but they're going to be offers that are going to continue to happen. So in the meantime, I would try to offer him something that makes sense financially. You and I talked about it. I would make it a little bit, offer him a good wage that actually has incentives built into it, that he can go up to a certain point, that if he meets certain markers, I think that would be fair. I think that'd be very fair. But offer him some good money regardless. That's the way I'm looking at it, my friend. Okay. So to finish up, I want to go back and talk about, because I continue to see here in America, especially, Fulham being linked to Ricardo Pepi from the U.S. men's national team and PSV Eindhoven. Tony, this is what I'm going to tell you. You and I have had a discussion about Pepi. I've seen him play. You probably have not. Maybe you've seen some highlights of Ricardo Pepi, but you were describing to me what Fulham need. They need something different in a striker. If you watch him play, you're going to see that everything you've described Ricardo Pepi is, okay? He's pacey. He can get behind the defense. He can put the ball in the back of the net. He can assist. He does a lot. And guess what? He's only 22 years old. But there's going to be a lot of competition for him. And on top of it, his team don't want to let him go. Your thoughts?
Yeah, obviously you've seen a lot more of him and know a lot more about him than I do. I've got snippets. But yeah, look, we need something different, to Raul and Munez. And ultimately, if you've got a variety of different strikers that can do different things, it gives you better options in games. And, it was so evident last season at times that we were just lacking, something different. So, again, it's Fulham dragging their heels. There's a lot of talk, a lot of speculation. There's nothing concrete. There are so many things that we need to improve on. And honestly, Tony Khan needs to, if he spent as much time on our transfer windows and our recruitment as he does with, watching grown men throw themselves around the ring and jumping on top of each other, we'd be in a much better place, genuinely, right?
Yeah.
And one of those situations is sorting out our academy and what we're doing with our young players and so on and so forth. It just seems that the priorities are just not where they need to be. Certainly from the outside looking in, it might be very different, on the other side, but it's just what it looks like. Yeah. So as fans, we're sitting here really frustrated because all we get is snippets and news articles and rumors and this and that and everything else. But then you're looking at it and thinking, the season starts in 8 weeks. Yeah, that's the reality. The season starts in 8 weeks. Yep. I know as a coaching, at non-league level, you need 12 weeks to get prepared. You need time to bed in players. You need to have, formations. You need to have systems. You need to have structure. Yep. And it takes time to bed in. New players take time. Yep. So what are we doing? Are we just going to hit the new season with the same 11 that we ended last season with? Because if we are, we're going to be in a world of hurt.
No, I hear you, Tony. I do it, and it's a little bit of a frustration for me too. And I don't think, like you and I talked about, Tony obviously is the director of football, right? But I think Marco has a lot more say on what's going on, and I think we'll agree on that. But they need to get their acting gear. They need to start really adding to the squad sooner than later. And please do not wait until the end of the window to add a few players. I've never thought that it really does enough for your squad. I think it hurts you in so many ways because you should have your squad intact, hopefully by the first match. I know that it's not realistic now. And to your point, Tony, I just wish they stop the transfer window before the first match. I think that would be the right thing to do for all teams. Anyways, final thoughts before we go, my friend. Great show.
Yeah, listen, it's all intriguing and very interesting. And as I say, we'll have to see how it pans out and plays out in the coming weeks. But first and foremost for me, we've got to get these players on contracts ASAP. Get them settled, get them in, sort it out, do it early, get it done now, and then we'll know where we stand. But like I said, Luke de Figueroa's, Josh King, those players have got to be in the first team squad, in my opinion, before the start of the season. Have to.
Okay. Excellent. Okay. Great show. I've really enjoyed. I always enjoy doing shows with you, Tony. We're going to have so much more on Cottage Talk throughout the lead up to the season, through the season. And I'm hopefully going to have an announcement sometime the end of July of what's going to be going on with Cottage Talk, which I think is going to be interesting to everyone. Can't do it now, but hopefully going to be doing it soon. But that's going to we need to wrap up the show. For Tony Gold, I'm Russ Goldman. Thank you as always for watching and listening to Cottage Talk.